I never thought jealousy could taste sweet. It started as something small. A playful sleepover, wine glasses sweating on the counter, candles burning too low for comfort. My best friend Lila had just broken up with her boyfriend. She needed a place to crash, someone to talk to. Somewhere that didn't smell like heartbreak. I offered her my guest room without hesitation. That's what friends do. We were opposites, always had been. She was chaos in designer heels, loud, bold, irresistibly radiant. I was more restrained, a little more curated. My life was a series of neatly folded lines. Hers was a page torn from a diary, stained with lipstick and secrets. That night, she padded out of the bathroom in one of my robes, my favorite one, the deep burgundy silk that slipped over skin like a whisper. Her hair was damp, her legs bare, and she laughed as she spun in the hallway mirror. "You always had good taste," she said, tugging at the belt. "That's because I never lend you anything," I smirked. She pouted in mock offense, but I saw it. The glint in her eye. Like she knew something I didn't. Or maybe she remembered something I'd forgotten. Some part of myself I hadn't touched in years. The wine kicked in slowly. We sat cross-legged on the floor, sharing a throw blanket and stories we'd told a dozen times before. But something was different. Every word she said felt like it was laced with intention. Every glance lingered a little too long. Every laugh curled into something softer, something I couldn't quite name. At some point she asked to borrow something to wear. "Anything you want," I said without thinking. She disappeared into my closet. I followed her, maybe out of habit, maybe out of some strange curiosity I wasn't ready to admit. She pulled out that dress, the one I hadn't worn in over a year. Midnight blue backless with a slit that made every step feel like a promise. I bought it after a particularly messy breakup, thinking I'd wear it when I felt powerful again. "This one?" she asked, holding it up to her frame. I hesitated. "That's a special one." She held it against her body, eyes never leaving mine. "That's why I want it." She slipped behind the door and I stood frozen, heart tapping unevenly. When she stepped out, everything stopped. She was the dress. It clung to her curves, shimmered against her skin like it had been waiting for her all along. And the way she looked at me, not for approval but for reaction, made my stomach twist. "What do you think?" she asked, turning slowly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because suddenly I wasn't sure whose story this was anymore. She twirled in front of the mirror like she was on stage and the room was her audience. My breath caught, not just because she looked stunning but because she knew she looked stunning. And she wanted me to see it. To feel it. "I think I'm going to keep it," she said casually, running her hands down the sides of the dress as if smoothing invisible wrinkles. Her tone was light, teasing, but her eyes never stopped watching me in the reflection. "You wouldn't," I said, half laughing. "Oh." She tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because it was mine. Because I hadn't even worn it yet. Because I'd saved that dress for a version of myself that was still trying to be brave again. But most of all because the way she wore it made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, replaced. Or maybe ignited." I said none of that. I just smiled. "It doesn't even look that good on you," I teased. She turned to face me fully, stepping closer. Bare feet quiet against the wood floors. "Liar." And then silence. The kind that stretches thin like skin over a bruise. I could hear my own breathing, embarrassingly shallow, as she moved even closer, closing the gap between us with slow, deliberate steps. "You used to be bolder," she said. Her voice dropped, smoky with something unspoken. My body tensed. "What's that supposed to mean?" She shrugged. "You were the one who taught me how to flirt. How to dress. How to get what I want." I looked away, suddenly flushed. That was a long time ago. Her fingers grazed my wrist. Featherlight, accidental on purpose. Not that long. I pulled back just enough to breathe but not enough to feel safe. She was in my space. In my memories. In my favorite dress. And I hated how much I liked it. That night she didn't change. She wore the dress to dinner with me. Barefoot, wild-haired, like she was daring the world to notice. And they did. Heads turned. Men stared. Even the waitress paused mid-order. But it was me she kept looking at. Over the rim of her wine glass. Under her lashes. Like every sip was a secret. By the time we got home, the air between us was electric and too quiet. I went to change into pajamas, trying to shake off the way her eyes had burned into me all night. But when I came back out, she was already curled on my bed, still in the dress, reading one of my books like she belonged there. "You're in my room," I said softly. She looked up, lips parting slightly. "So come in." I didn't move. I just stood there, heart pounding, torn between every rule I'd made for myself and every part of me that wanted to break them. I didn't step into the room. Not yet. I leaned against the doorframe, pretending I wasn't unraveling. She was sprawled across my bed like it was hers, one leg bent, the hem of the dress sliding just high enough to blur the line between innocence and invitation. Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the edge of the book, but her eyes were on me. Only me. "You look like you're about to run," she said softly. I crossed my arms. "Maybe I should." She laughed, that low, throaty kind of laugh that you feel more than hear. "Is that because of the dress, or because of what it's doing to you?" I should have left, closed the door, created distance. But I didn't. Instead, I walked in slowly, cautiously, as if the air might shatter if I breathed too hard. My room had never felt smaller. Or warmer. She shifted, making room beside her, but I sat on the edge of the bed instead, facing away. Silence settled again. Heavy. Loaded. "I remember when you first bought that dress," she said behind me. "You tried it on in front of me and said it made you feel dangerous." "It did," I murmured. "Back when I still knew how to be." She moved. I felt the shift in the mattress, the warmth of her body crawling closer. Her voice was closer too. Barely above a whisper now. "You still do. You've just forgotten how to let yourself feel it." I turned then, just enough to meet her gaze. She was inches away. And God, her eyes, they didn't blink. They just searched. Waited. "Lila," I started. She touched my shoulder, light, careful, as if testing how far she could go. "Tell me to stop." The words were right there, but they never left my mouth. Instead, I stared at her hand, her fingers brushing over my collarbone, tracing the neckline of the shirt I'd thrown on just to get away from her. I didn't stop her. Because something inside me, something buried, something wild, didn't want to. "I should be mad at you," I whispered. "You took something from me." She leaned closer, her breath barely grazing my cheek. "Maybe I'm just giving you permission to want it back." The heat between us was unbearable. Not physical heat, but emotional. Tension that crackled, that made every inch of me ache without being touched. And yet neither of us moved beyond that fragile space. It was a dare. A question. A trap. And I was already inside it. Then her phone buzzed, sharp and sudden, breaking the spell. She blinked, pulled back, looked at the screen, and smiled. "Looks like I've got plans tomorrow," she said, slipping off the bed, the dress hugging her like it had claimed her now. "Hope you don't mind if I wear this out." She didn't wait for permission. She just walked out, hips swaying, bare feet whispering against the floor, and left me there, staring at the door. Burning. She left just after noon. Hair pulled back, sunglasses on, lips glossed like temptation itself. My dress clung to her like it had been made for her skin, not mine, like it had forgotten who bought it, who chose it, who dreamed in it. And maybe it had. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped into the rideshare, one hand still fixing the hem. She didn't look back. But I did. Again and again. All day I told myself I didn't care. That it was just fabric. That friends borrow things. That Lila had always been impulsive and beautiful and selfish in ways I had secretly admired. But it wasn't just the dress anymore. It was the fact that I couldn't stop picturing her in it. In my mirror. On my bed. In my space, leaving behind her perfume like a signature. By sunset I was pacing. By nightfall I was spiraling. She didn't text. Didn't call. Hours stretched too long. And every time my phone lit up with a notification that wasn't her, something inside me knotted tighter. It was ridiculous. I wasn't her mother. I wasn't her lover. I wasn't even sure I liked her that much anymore. But when she walked through the door at 10:14 p.m., flushed and glowing like she'd stolen the entire night, I couldn't breathe. "Well," I asked, trying to sound casual. "How was it?" She dropped her purse, kicked off her shoes, stretched like a cat, long and slow and unapologetic. "Perfect," she said. Everyone stared. I forgot how addictive that feels. I swallowed hard. "You wore my dress." She blinked like she'd genuinely forgotten. You said I could. No, I said, stepping closer. I said you could borrow something. Not that. She tilted her head, smiling slightly. So why didn't you stop me? Because I wanted to see what she would do. Because some part of me wanted to be challenged, possessed, unraveled. I didn't say any of that. She walked past me into the kitchen, humming softly as she poured herself a glass of water. I watched the way her spine moved under the fabric, how the slit of the dress opened with every step, revealing flashes of her thigh. My dress had never looked so alive. Do you even know what that dress meant to me? I asked quietly. She turned, leaned against the counter, glass in hand, and studied me for a long moment. It wasn't about the dress, she said. It was about seeing if you'd fight for something. Anything. And there it was, the challenge. The invitation. The knife she had no problem twisting. I walked up to her, heart pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. We were too close again. Always too close. I don't know what game you're playing, I said, voice low. But I'm not losing. Her eyes darkened. Then maybe you should start playing. She set the glass down, brushed past me again, her shoulder grazing mine like a spark thrown on dry grass, and disappeared down the hall. I stood there, hand gripping the edge of the counter, pulse thundering, skin hot. And somewhere in the quiet, I realized something dangerous. She hadn't just taken the dress. She'd taken control. The next morning she was gone. Just like that. No note, no message, not even the usual clatter of a coffee mug in the sink. Only the faint imprint of her body still etched into my sheets, and a few strands of her dark hair on my pillow like she'd shed part of herself into my sleep. The house was quiet in that unsettling way it gets after someone's energy leaves it. Too still. Too airless. I should have felt relief. Instead I felt hollow. Her suitcase was still in the guest room. A few of her clothes scattered across the chair. Lip balm. A bra draped on the doorknob. Chaos frozen in place. I walked into the room, drawn by something I didn't understand. Maybe I wanted to feel in control again. Or maybe I just wanted to feel closer to the storm I was pretending not to crave. Her bag was unzipped. Not in an obvious way, but slightly open, like it had been rummaged through in haste. I told myself I was just curious. Just cleaning up. Just checking. But the lie fell apart when I pulled the zipper all the way down. At first it was the usual: lipstick tubes, tangled jewelry, receipts from last night's bar. But then, tucked into a side pocket, folded and pressed flat, I found something that did not belong to her. Something that belonged to me. It was a photo. One I hadn't seen in years. Me in that very same dress. The night I bought it, the one time I'd ever worn it, snapped by a friend in front of a club mirror. My hair wild. My eyes drunk on something more than alcohol. And Lila, just out of frame, her hand resting on my shoulder, barely visible. How did she even have this? I stared at it, blood humming. There was a note on the back. Scribbled in her handwriting, faint but unmistakable. I wanted to be her. Until I wanted her. I dropped the photo like it burned. Every inch of me tensed. Questions surged. How long had she kept this? Why did she bring it here? And why now? Was this some kind of game? I should have confronted her. Demanded answers. Screamed. But instead, I felt exposed. Seen. Because deep down, beneath the jealousy, the boundary crossing, the breathless standoffs, there had always been something. A thread that had never quite snapped. A tension we'd learned to ignore until it became impossible to unfeel. She came back late that night. Again without explanation. Tossed her keys on the counter, slipped off her shoes, and padded into the living room like she hadn't just detonated something inside me. You went through my stuff, she said simply, not looking at me. I didn't deny it. She turned and her eyes were different now, not teasing, not playful. They were raw. You weren't supposed to find that. Why did you keep it? I asked. She walked slowly toward me, pausing just inches away. I kept it, she said, voice trembling. Because that night was the first time I realized you'd never really need me. And the first time I wanted to make you. I didn't breathe. She lifted her hand, not to touch, but to hover. Near my face. Near my lips. And still she didn't touch. It was worse than if she had. It was everything she wasn't saying. Everything I was still afraid to admit. She didn't touch me. She just stood there. Fingers suspended in air, breath quiet, eyes searching my face like she was reading a page she had written years ago and finally dared to revisit. My skin hummed where her hand hovered. Every part of me tensed, anticipating a contact that never came. And somehow the absence of her touch made everything more unbearable. "Say something," she whispered. But I couldn't, because my entire body was screaming, not in panic but in recognition. Like a door had just opened inside me, one I'd kept locked for years. One she apparently never stopped knocking on. "You kept a photo of me," I said finally, voice thin, trembling. "That night, you didn't even like girls back then." She blinked, slow and deliberate. "Who said I didn't?" My breath caught. She lowered her hand, but she didn't step back. We were still too close. Too still. "Lila, why now?" I asked. "Why wear the dress? Why that night? Why this?" She looked down as if embarrassed by the truth. Then softly she said, "Because you always made me feel like I was too much. And that dress that night, you made too much look beautiful." Her voice cracked on the word. "I wanted to feel what it was like to be that girl. To take up space the way you did. To be fearless. But when I wore it, all I could think about was how badly I wanted you to look at me the way I looked at you." I swallowed hard. "Lila, this isn't a game." "I know," she said, her voice barely there. "It stopped being a game the moment I saw you watching me in that hallway mirror. Everything in me screamed to move, to close the space, to make the silence mean something. But my feet didn't budge." "I thought you were just messing with me," I said. She smiled, but it was sad, wounded. "No. I was just scared you wouldn't feel the same." And then finally she touched me. Not with urgency. Not with fire. But gently. Like she was afraid I'd vanish if she pushed too hard. Her fingertips grazed my jaw, and the sensation crawled down my spine like liquid heat. My eyes fluttered shut without meaning to. The world narrowed into breath and skin and everything we hadn't said. When I opened my eyes, she was right there. And we weren't friends anymore. We weren't pretending. We were two women on the edge of something dangerous, something beautiful, something real. I could have pulled her into me. I could have made it easy. But instead, I said the one thing neither of us expected. "I want it back." She blinked. "What?" "The dress," I said. "It's mine. You don't get to keep it unless you earn it." Her expression flickered, surprise, confusion, and then something far darker. Challenge. "Oh," she said, stepping even closer. "And how exactly do I earn it?" I met her gaze, steady now. "Make me want to give it to you." And in that moment her whole body shifted. From apology to desire. From regret to promise. Her eyes didn't blink. Not once. She stared at me like she'd been waiting years for permission, and I just handed it to her on a trembling open palm. "Make you want to give it to me," she repeated slowly, tasting the words like they were forbidden fruit. "That's dangerous." "So is wearing a dress that isn't yours," I said, stepping around her, slow, deliberate, circling. "So is walking into someone's life and lighting a match." She turned to follow me, mirroring my steps, her voice a whisper behind me. "Maybe I wanted to see if you'd burn." The air between us tightened, stretched. Everything in the room, the soft light, the thick silence, even the echo of our footsteps, started to pulse with something that didn't have a name yet. "I don't think you realize," I said, turning to face her fully, "how close you are to crossing a line." Her gaze didn't flinch. Maybe I already did. I stared at her. The way the midnight blue fabric clung to her body, the way her shoulders rose and fell with careful breath, the way every inch of her seemed to glow under the weight of her own defiance. She looked like temptation personified. But it wasn't the dress anymore. It was her. The way she looked at me, bold, hungry, almost reverent, like I was the thing she had worshipped from afar and finally dared to reach for. No one had looked at me like that in a long, long time. And it shattered something inside me. "I used to dream about this," I admitted, my voice quieter now, more exposed. "Not just you, but this moment. The moment someone looked at me and saw me." Lila stepped forward. "I always saw you. Even when you were too careful to see yourself." She reached for the zipper at her side. Slowly. Not to take the dress off, but to offer it. "I'll give it back," she said, her voice trembling with something between surrender and hope. "If you really want it." I stepped forward, heart pounding, skin alive, and reached for her hand. Not the zipper. Her hand. Because I suddenly understood what she meant. What the dress symbolized. What this whole delicious mess had always been about. Control. Desire. The ache to be chosen. And the truth? I didn't want the dress back. Not anymore. I don't want it, I whispered. I want you to wear it when you're mine. Her breath caught. And for a moment everything stilled. No more teasing. No more dares. Just the quiet realization that we'd passed the point of no return. Then her phone buzzed again. A shrill, jarring sound that cut through the room like a knife. She didn't look at it right away. But when she did, her entire body stiffened. And the color drained from her face. I saw it before she could hide it. Who is it? I asked. She hesitated. Then looked up with something that felt like guilt and fear. My ex. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen. A name I didn't recognize. But the way her lips tightened, the way her breath caught, I didn't need to ask. The energy shifted instantly, like someone had pulled the power cord from the wall. Are you going to answer it? I asked, barely above a whisper. She looked at me, torn in a way I'd never seen before. I don't know, she said. I didn't think he'd still care. I stepped back. Just once. Just enough for her to feel it. He always cared, I said. You just didn't want him until he stopped wanting you. That's not fair, she snapped. No, I said. But maybe it's true. She looked like she wanted to argue. But instead she set the phone down. Slowly, deliberately, and walked toward me. The dress still wrapped around her like memory. Her face unreadable. Do you think I'm cruel? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I saw too much in her. The recklessness, the hunger, the deep, buried ache of someone who wanted love but didn't know how to ask for it without tearing something down first. No, I said. But I think you're afraid. She exhaled. And for once she didn't deny it. I wore your dress because I missed you, she said. Not just us. Not the memories or the teasing or the way you used to make me feel invincible. I missed this. Being near you. Feeling like I'm seen. You could have just said that, I whispered. She stepped closer. Her hands at her sides, shaking just slightly. I didn't think you'd want me like this. I reached up, tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. You're wrong. The tension between us softened. Something vulnerable passed between our eyes. Something real, something earned. But I knew even then it couldn't last. Some stories aren't meant to end in forever. That night she stayed. We didn't sleep. Not in the usual sense. We lay side by side, her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns over my stomach. We talked. About everything. About nothing. The kind of conversations that only happen when it's dark enough for honesty. In the morning she was gone. But not like before. She left the dress folded carefully on my pillow, still warm from her skin. And tucked beneath it the photo I'd found. The one she had carried for years. On the back she'd written something new. You made me brave. That's why I had to let you go. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the fabric, tracing the ink. I didn't cry. I didn't chase her. Some stories don't need a sequel. Just a memory. A touch. A moment that once burned too bright to last. She wore my dress. And no, she didn't give it back. 'Cause she never really took it. She just showed me what it meant to wear me. If you've ever had someone walk into your life, light it on fire, and leave you stronger for the wreckage, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Raw, intimate, unforgettable.